The silence of the void between galaxies is not truly empty. It is a graveyard of echoes, a museum of dead signals from civilizations that failed the Great Filter. For the High Council of the Xar'Koth, the silence was comforting. It represented order. It represented a universe purged of chaos, manicured into submission by their billion-year-old bureaucracy. They were the gardeners of the cosmos, and they possessed the heavy shears required to prune the unruly weeds of young sentient life. High Councilor Vrex sat upon his obsidian throne, a structure grown from living crystal that hummed with the psychic resonance of 1,000 conquered worlds. He stared at the holographic projection floating in the center of the grand chamber. It was a blue marble, swirled with white clouds, orbiting a yellow dwarf star in a nondescript backwater sector of the Orion Arm. To Vrex, it looked insignificant. It looked like a harvest. Beside him, Sub-Commander Lyra adjusted her ceremonial armor. It was sleek, iridescent, and designed to intimidate. She tapped a claw against her datapad. "This species," she began, her voice a series of clicks and melodic hums translated instantly by the universal interface, "calls itself humanity. They are a class-3 civilization. They have barely cracked the atom. They rely on chemical propulsion for spaceflight. Their planetary network is a chaotic mess of conflicting signals. They are tribal, fractured, and aggressive. A perfect candidate for annexation. Protocol 7. Vrex nodded slowly. Protocol 7 was efficient. It involved a display of overwhelming force, the immediate dismantling of local governments, and the integration of the population into the labor caste. It was a mercy, really. Left to their own devices, species like this usually nuked themselves into extinction within a century. The Xar'Koth brought purpose. The Xar'Koth brought stability. "Send the vanguard," Vrex ordered, waving a hand dismissively. "One heavy cruiser should be sufficient. Do not damage the biosphere too severely. We need the water. And bring me their leaders." I wish to see the look in their eyes when they realize the universe is not theirs to conquer. It was a routine order. It was the same order Vrex had given 500 times before for 500 other primitive worlds. He turned his attention back to the administrative reports of the core worlds, forgetting the blue marble instantly. He did not know that he had just signed the death warrant of the Xar'Koth Empire. He did not know that Earth was not just another weed to be pruned. It was a sleeping predator, and he had just stepped on its tail. When the Xar'Koth cruiser, the harmony of silence, decloaked in high Earth orbit, the world stopped. It didn't happen with a bang, but with a displacement of light that shattered the sky. The ship was massive, a teardrop of silver metal that defied gravity, hanging over the North Atlantic like a moon brought down to crush the ocean. It was beautiful, terrified, and undeniably superior. On the bridge of the Harmony, Captain Kale looked down at the planet with bored indifference. His scanners showed panic. Global communications networks were flooding with hysteria. Military forces were scrambling, launching primitive jets that looked like toys against the backdrop of his vessel's shielding. He tapped a button, broadcasting on all frequencies. "Inhabitants of Earth," Kale's voice boomed, translated into every major language simultaneously by the ship's AI. "Do not be alarmed. Your chaotic existence is at an end. You have been chosen for integration into the Xar'Koth Dominion. Lay down your weapons, dissolve your governments, prepare for processing. Resistance will result in immediate planetary sterilization. You have one solar rotation to comply." Kale leaned back, expecting the usual sequence of events: denial, bargaining, and then a quick, weeping surrender. He watched the screens. He saw the primitive jets turning back. He saw the military bases go silent. He smiled. It was always the same. Fear was the universal language, and the Xar'Koth spoke it fluently. But down on the surface, in a bunker buried 2 miles beneath the granite of the Rocky Mountains, General Marcus Grave was not weeping. He was smoking a cigar that was technically illegal in the facility, and he was looking at a screen filled with telemetry data. Around him, the best tactical minds of the United Nations Defense Coalition were working in a frenzy, but it was a cold, calculated frenzy. "Analysis?" Grave asked, his voice gravel and iron. Dr. Aris Thorne, head of xenophysics, didn't look up from her monitor. It's energy shielding, general, high frequency. Based on the displacement readings, they're manipulating gravity to stay aloft. That ship isn't floating, it's constantly falling and catching itself. If we disrupt the emitter array at the keel, the whole thing comes down. Can we disrupt it? Grav asked. Thorne looked at him. With conventional nukes, no, the radiation would just wash over the shields, but we have the kinetic drivers, the Project Thor satellites. They aren't energy weapons. They're tungsten rods the size of telephone poles dropped from orbit. Pure kinetic energy. If their shields are designed to disperse energy, lasers, plasma, radiation, they might not be calibrated for a solid object moving at Mach 10. Grav took a drag of his cigar. Might, Thorne shrugged. It's a rock versus a flashlight, general. Physics usually bets on the rock. Grav nodded. He looked at the comms officer. Get me the president. And get me the leaders of China, Russia, and the European Federation. Tell them we aren't surrendering. Tell them we're going to show our guests why you don't kick the hornet's nest. The Xar'Koth expected silence. They expected submission. What they got was music. 12 hours into the deadline, the Earth began to sing. It wasn't a digital signal or a spoken plea. It was a massive, synchronized broadcast of classical music, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, blasted at maximum volume on every radio frequency, every digital channel, every analog wave. Captain Kale frowned, his sensitive auditory receptors irritated by the primitive, aggressive sound. Why are they doing this? Is this a ritual? Scanning, his operations officer replied. It appears to be psychological defiance. They are mocking us, Captain. Kale's eyes narrowed. Mocking us? A species that burns dinosaur bones for fuel is mocking the Dominion. Prepare the plasma batteries. Target their largest population center. We will silence this noise with fire. But before Kale could give the order, the alarms on the harmony of silence screamed. High-energy signatures detected in orbit. The operations officer yelled, panic cracking his composure. Above us. They have satellites. Kale laughed. Satellites? Debris, ignore them. They aren't firing lasers, Captain, they're dropping. Mass, Kale froze. Mass, space warfare for the Xar'Koth was a dance of beams and shields. It was elegant. No one used kinetic bombardment anymore. It was barbaric, it was crude, it was messy, and it was unstoppable. From high Earth orbit, 24 tungsten rods, released from the Zeus platforms, fell toward the harmony of silence. They carried no explosives. They needed none. Gravity was the engine, and the planet was the bowstring. They accelerated to speeds that turned the air around them into plasma. The first rod hit the upper shield of the alien cruiser. There was no explosion, only a transfer of energy so violent that the shield generator didn't fail, it vaporized. The rod shattered, but the momentum carried through. The second rod punched a hole through the hull. The third rod obliterated the gravity drive. Inside the ship, the world turned sideways. The artificial gravity failed. Captain Kale was thrown against the ceiling as the magnificent silver teardrop groaned, a sound like a dying god, and began to plummet toward the Atlantic Ocean. The impact caused a tsunami that washed over the Azores, but the message it sent was far more destructive. The live feed of the alien ship crashing into the water was broadcast to every screen on Earth. And then it was broadcast back into deep space. In the throne room of the High Council, Vrex watched the feed go dead. The silence returned, but this time it was not comforting. It was heavy. They destroyed it, Lyra whispered, her mandibles trembling. A Classminus 3 civilization destroyed a Dominion cruiser. Vrex stood up. The air around him grew cold. This is an anomaly, a fluke. They got lucky. They used a trick. He activated the fleet comms, mobilized the Third Armada, burn that sector, leave nothing but ash. I want their history erased. I want their name forgotten. The Xar'Koth war machine was slow to start, but once it moved, it was an avalanche. Thousands of ships, sleek and deadly, began the warp transit to the Sol system. They expected to arrive at a terrified world. They expected to find humanity cowering in the rubble. But humanity has a unique trait. It is a trait forged in the Ice Ages, honed in the trenches of global wars, and sharpened by a history of surviving the impossible. Humanity does not cower when the odds are impossible. Humanity digs in. And humanity reverse engineers really, really fast. The wreckage of the harmony of silence was not left to sink. It was salvaged. Teams of engineers, scientists, and scavengers descended on the crash site like ants on a sugar cube. They tore apart the gravity drives. They dissected the plasma cannons. They cracked the code of the energy shields. Within 6 months, the time it took for the Third Armada to travel the distance between stars, Earth had changed. The factories didn't stop. The lights didn't go out. The entire planetary economy was shifted to a single purpose: war. When the Third Armada dropped out of warp at the edge of the solar system, High Admiral Zoll expected to see a defenseless blue marble. Instead, he saw a fortress. The orbit of Earth was cluttered with mines, not explosive mines, but nuclear-pumped X-ray lasers. The moon had been converted into a railgun emplacement. And floating in the dark between the Earth and Mars was a fleet. It was an ugly fleet. The human ships were not sleek teardrops. They were blocks of steel and ceramic, welded together with exposed girders and massive thruster cones. They looked like flying oil refineries. They looked like bricks with engines, but they were bristling with stolen tech. Zoll scoffed. "Look at them. They strapped our engines to their garbage scows. They think they can fight us with scrap metal." He ordered the attack. "All ships, engage. Pattern Delta, wipe them out." The Battle of Sol was not a tactical exchange. It was a brawl. The Xar'Koth ships moved with grace, firing precise beams of antimatter. The human ships didn't move much at all. They just took the hits, but they didn't break. On the bridge of the flagship, UNS Indomitable, Admiral Hackett watched the shields hold. They were jury-rigged, unstable, and glowing a dangerous violet, but they held. "Report," Hackett barked. "Shields at 40%. Armor holding. Their beams are dispersing over the ablative coating." Hackett grinned, a predatory grin. "Good. They want a light show. Let's give them a headache. Fire the max." The human ships were built around a single philosophy: throw something heavy, very fast. The magnetic accelerator cannons ran the length of the ships. They fired 600-ton slugs of depleted uranium at a fraction of the speed of light. The Xar'Koth shields were designed to deflect energy. They were designed to disperse heat. They were not designed to stop a skyscraper moving at relativistic speeds. The first volley tore through the Dominion vanguard like tissue paper. Xar'Koth ships didn't explode, they shattered. The kinetic impact turned their crews into paste before the hulls even breached. The elegance of the alien fleet collapsed into chaos. Admiral Zoll stared at his tactical plot in horror. They aren't fighting by the rules. They are using brute force. Why won't they die? He watched as a human cruiser, burning and venting atmosphere, rammed a Dominion destroyer. It was suicidal. It was insane. It was human. The signal came through from the human flagship. It was an audio-only channel. It was Hackett's voice. "Attention, alien fleet. This is the Solar Warden. You are trespassing in sovereign space. You have fired upon our home. We are not a species that believes in submission. We are the children of the persistence hunter. We will chase you until your engines fail. We will fight you until the last star burns out. Leave now or become dust." Zoll was a veteran of 1,000 campaigns. He had never felt fear. But looking at the debris field, looking at these ugly, broken ships that kept coming forward through the fire, he felt a chill in his blood. "Pull back," Zoll screamed. "Regroup at the staging point. We need to reassess." The Third Armada retreated. It was the first time in 10,000 years that a Dominion fleet had fled from a primitive world. Back on the High Council, the mood had shifted from arrogance to confusion. "How?" Vrex demanded, slamming his fist on the throne. "How does a species that fights wars over colored cloth defeat the Armada?" Subcommander Lyra projected a new hologram. It was a study of human biology and psychology. "High Counselor," she said, her voice quiet, "we made a mistake in our assessment. We looked at their technology. We looked at their disunity. We did not look at their spirit." "Spirit?" Vrex spat. "Superstition?" "No," Lyra corrected. "Adrenaline. Endorphins, a biological override that allows them to ignore pain, ignore logic, and ignore probability. When they are cornered, they do not submit. They enter a state of hyperfocus. They call it spite." They are willing to die just to ensure you do not win. They value freedom more than survival. We are fighting a hive mind where every drone is a berserker. Then we exterminate them, Vrex said coldly. No more fleets. No more occupation. Prepare the planet cracker. The hand of judgment. We will crack their world in half. The hand of judgment was a weapon the size of a small moon. It was the ultimate sanction. It took months to charge and required a massive escort. The Council authorized its deployment. They believed that the threat of total planetary annihilation would finally break the human will. They were wrong. When the long-range sensors picked up the massive energy signature approaching the system, humanity didn't panic. The panic had burned out months ago. What replaced it was a cold, hard resolve. General Grav, now Supreme Commander of Sol Defense, stood before the United Earth Council. They're bringing a planet killer, he said simply. What do we do? The French Prime Minister asked. Grav looked at the map of the galaxy. We don't defend anymore. Defense is a waiting game, and we're running out of time. If they want to bring a hammer, we need to become the anvil, but we also need a spear. He pointed to the location of the enemy homeworld, coordinates ripped from the computer core of the captured cruiser. We have their star charts. We have their warp drives. We have enough nukes to turn a star system into a microwave. While they bring their big gun here, their home is unguarded. It's a suicide mission, the Russian president noted. Grav smiled. It's a human mission. Operation Broken Chain was launched. While the main Earth fleet staged a desperate, suicidal defense of the solar system to buy time, a task force of 50 stealth-modified ships slipped into warp. They weren't heading for the enemy fleet. They were heading for the heart of the Dominion. The battle for Earth was apocalyptic. The hand of judgment was surrounded by thousands of fighters. The human defense fleet was outnumbered 10-1, ships burned in the dark. The moon was scarred by stray plasma blasts. Cities were vaporized by orbital strikes, but on the surface, people fired assault rifles at landing crafts. Civilians built bombs in their basements. The atmosphere was choked with smoke, but the flags were still flying. The Xar'Koth soldiers, genetically engineered for obedience and war, were terrified. They were fighting demons. They were fighting creatures that kept moving after losing limbs, creatures that laughed as they detonated suicide vests. High above, Admiral Hackett's ship, the Indomitable, was a wreck. The bridge was on fire. One engine was gone. Ramming speed, Hackett ordered, "Target the weapons emitter." "Admiral, we won't make it." His helmsman cried, "We don't have to make it. We just have to dent it." The Indomitable accelerated. It took fire from 100 angles. It was disintegrating, but it struck the hand of judgment just as it was powering up. The impact threw the aim of the planet killer off by a fraction of a degree. The beam fired. It missed Earth. It grazed the side of Mars, turning a massive crater into a molten lake, but Earth survived. And at that exact moment, halfway across the galaxy, the Xar'Koth High Council received a notification. "Alarm!" Sub-Commander Lyra screamed. "Warp signatures in orbit." Vrex looked up. In orbit of what? Here, in orbit of Prime. The 50 human ships dropped out of warp. They didn't hail the planet. They didn't ask for surrender. They simply opened their bay doors. Each ship carried a payload of dirty bombs, cobalt warheads, and experimental antimatter charges. They targeted the orbital tethers. They targeted the crystal spires of the bureaucracy. They targeted the silence. A single message was broadcast from the lead human ship, the UNS Vengeance. It was General Grav's voice. "You came to our house. You broke our windows. You tried to kill our children. Now we are returning the favor." This is the sound of humanity. The bombardment of Prime was brief. The human ships dumped their entire arsenals in 3 minutes and then warped out before the defenses could react. They didn't destroy the planet. They didn't have the firepower for that, but they decapitated the Empire. The crystal towers shattered. The neural network that controlled the slave castes was severed. The Garden of the Galaxy was set on fire. Chaos erupted across the Dominion. Without the central command, the enslaved species revolted. The fleets, confused and leaderless, broke apart. The hand of judgment, stranded in the Sol system without orders, was boarded and captured by Marines who used plasma cutters and shotguns to clear the decks. 6 months later, the war was effectively over. The Xar'Koth Empire was fractured into 1,000 warring warlord states, and amidst the ruins, a new power was rising. Ambassador Vrelk, a survivor of the old council, sat in a negotiation room on Geneva Station. He was no longer looking down at a blue marble. He was looking across a steel table at a human woman in a sharp suit. "We require assistance," Vrelk said, his voice humble. "The pirates, the rogue fleets, we cannot maintain order." The human smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We can help. We have a lot of surplus ships. We have a lot of soldiers who are bored, but the price has changed." "Price?" Vrelk asked. "You wanted to integrate us," she said. "You wanted to make us part of your order. Well, we're going to integrate you. You're going to learn about democracy. You're going to learn about free trade. And you're going to learn that when you knock on a door in this galaxy, you better be polite." Vrelk looked at the datapad she slid across the table. It wasn't a treaty of surrender. It was a trade agreement, but the terms were absolute. The humans were not conquerors in the traditional sense. They didn't want to rule the galaxy. They just wanted to make sure the galaxy never tried to rule them again. He signed. As he left the station, he looked out at the shipyard. He saw the new class of human ships being built. They were still blocky. They were still ugly. But they were massive, and painted on the side of the largest dreadnought was a symbol. It wasn't an eagle or a globe. It was a simple image of a broken chain. The galaxy had spent billions of years seeking perfection, silence, and order. They had sought to prune the garden, but they had forgotten that life, true life, is messy, it is loud, it is violent, and it is resilient. The humans had taught them a lesson written in fire and tungsten. The universe is not a garden to be kept. It is a jungle, and the humans, they are the ones who brought the machetes. Back on Earth, the cities were rebuilding. The scars on the planet would last for centuries. But in the parks, children played with toys that defied gravity. In the universities, students studied the archives of a billion-year-old empire, and in the void, the human fleet stood watch. They were the new guardians, not of order but of chaos, of the beautiful, terrifying freedom that allowed a primitive species to look a god in the eye and say, "No." The silence was gone. The galaxy was noisy now. It was filled with the transmissions of 1,000 free worlds, shouting over each other, arguing, trading, living. And underneath it all, if you listened closely to the background radiation, you could still hear the faint, rhythmic thumping of the human war drums, a heartbeat that said one thing to the darkness: "We are here, we are awake, and we are not going anywhere." The end.